The great book lay closed, as it had for a very long time. Its cover was soft with dust, and its spine was cracked with age. Inside, the story had stopped, right in the middle of a most exciting part. The characters were frozen, the adventure was paused, and the very last page of that book felt terribly, awfully alone. This page was not like the others. It was mostly blank, with just a single lonely sentence sitting in the middle of its vast whiteness. And so they wondered what would happen next. It was a sentence full of question marks, even though it didn't have any. It was an ending that didn't feel like an ending at all. It felt like a door that had been left swinging open in the wind. The little page, for it felt very small in the big, quiet book, wished more than anything to be a proper ending. It wanted to have a grand "The End" written on it in beautiful swirling letters, with a proud full stop that would let everyone know the story was complete and satisfying. But it was not. It was just a page that stopped. One quiet afternoon, a sunbeam fell across the cover of the book, warming the old leather, and something magical began to happen. The ink on all the pages, the letters and the words and the punctuation marks began to soften. They loosened their grip on the paper, turning from dry black marks into something wet and shimmering. The entire story, from the first word to the very last incomplete sentence, melted into a pool of glistening, liquid ink. And then, the most extraordinary thing occurred. The pool of ink deepened and widened, spilling right out of the book. It didn't make a mess. Oh no. It formed a beautiful, dark, shimmering ocean right there on the desk. This was the Inkwell Ocean, a sea made of forgotten words and unfinished tales. The last page, now free from the binding of the book, found itself afloat on this gentle ocean. It was a little paper boat, bobbing on the soft, ink-black waves. The water was warm and smelled of old paper and promises, but the page still felt that lonely ache in its very fibers. It looked around at the other bits of stories floating by, a lost comma, a half-formed idea that looked like a wisp of cloud, a capital letter that had once begun a very important name. Everyone seemed as lost as it was. The page boat sailed on, under a paper moon, and stars that looked like tiny sparkling periods. The ocean was quiet, with only the soft lapping of wavelets against its paper hull. It wondered if it would float forever, never becoming anything at all. But what the little page didn't know was that the Inkwell Ocean was not a place for endings. It was a place for waiting. It was a place where stories went to rest before they began again. The first sign of this was a soft, bubbling sound. Up from the depths of the ocean rose a friendly, glowing fish. Its scales were not like ordinary scales. Each one was a shimmering letter from a forgotten alphabet, and it shone with a soft, blue light. The glowing fish swam right up to the page boat, circling it once, then twice. The little page was nervous. It had never met a fish before, especially not one made of letters. The fish, sensing the page's worry, did not speak, for nothing in the Inkwell Ocean used direct words. Instead, it communicated with a gentle bump against the page's side, a nudge that felt like a question. The feeling it sent was one of curiosity, asking the page why it was so sad. And the page, in the way of pages and boats on magical oceans, felt its own thoughts ripple outwards. It didn't speak, but it conveyed a feeling of incompleteness, a deep sorrow for being an ending that wasn't proper, a final chapter that had let everyone down. The glowing fish listened with its whole glowing body. Then it did a wonderful thing. It flicked its tail, and a single, shining letter scale popped right off and landed on the blank space of the page boat. It was the letter B. It glowed softly on the white paper. The fish then nudged the page boat gently, urging it to follow. It was leading the page on its first lesson about the ocean's cycles. The fish led the page boat to a wonderful place. It was a coral reef, but the coral was not made of stone. It was made of stacked and layered paragraphs from old stories, their meanings hidden in beautiful, colorful shapes. And growing on this coral were sea anemones, but their waving tentacles were the bristles of old paintbrushes, dancing in the current. And on one particularly beautiful piece of coral, a story about a grand castle, there sat a grumpy old crab. His shell was not brown or green, but the dark, blotchy black of a dried-up ink stain. His eyes were on little stalks that moved this way and that, and he clicked his claws together, making a sound like two pencils tapping. He was the guardian of the used-up things, and he believed that once something was over, it was over for good. The glowing fish gave the page a little encouraging nudge. The page boat floated closer to the crab, feeling a new emotion, not just loneliness, but a desire to understand. The old crab clacked his claws grumpily. He did not speak, but he projected his thoughts with such force that the ink around him shimmered. His message was clear and stern. He believed that the page's journey was silly. "You are an ending," he conveyed. "Your job is done. The story is over. You should sink to the bottom of the ocean and rest with the other finished things. There is no point in floating around. Endings are final." His words, felt more than heard, made the little page feel heavy. The water seemed colder. Was the crab right? Was it foolish to hope for more? The single letter B on its surface seemed to dim. This was the page's first challenge, to face the idea that an ending might be truly final. But the glowing fish, still circling faithfully, glowed a little brighter, as if to say, "Wait, there is more to see." Can you feel the difference, little listener? The crab's message felt cold and still, like a stone, but the fish's hope felt warm and bubbly, like a fizzy drink. Which feeling would you choose to believe? The fish led the page boat away from the grumpy crab, deeper into the Inkwell Ocean. They sailed past whirlpools of swirling adjectives and over deep trenches where forgotten novels slept. The page was beginning to understand that this ocean was full of things that had once been endings. Soon they heard a new sound, a soft, rhythmic, shooshing sound. Shh. It was the sound of the ocean's tides, but also the sound of pages being turned. They had reached the shores of the ocean, a beach made of the finest, softest white sand. But as the page boat drifted closer, it saw that the sand was not sand at all. It was sugar, a great wide beach of sparkling white sugar. And on the beach, a magnificent creature was pacing. It was the wondrous whisperer, a being with the gentle body of a lion and the vast, beautiful wings of a great owl. Its fur was the color of a fresh cream page, and its eyes were kind and knowing. The shh sound was the whisper of its wings as it moved along the sugar shore. The whisperer saw the little page boat and approached, its steps making no sound. It lowered its great head and looked at the page, at its lonely sentence and its single new letter, B. The page felt its nervousness return. This creature was so grand and so wise. The whisperer did not need to touch the page to communicate. It simply breathed a soft, warm breath that smelled of vanilla and old, wonderful libraries. And with that breath came a flood of understanding, the second lesson of the cycle. The whisperer showed the page, not with words, but with feelings, how the sugar on the beach had once been part of a big, hard sugar cube. Someone had enjoyed a cup of tea and the sugar cube had ended. But that ending wasn't sad, because it became this beautiful, sparkling beach for new stories to play on. The ending of the sugar cube was the beginning of the sugar shore. The page boat trembled with a new feeling. It wasn't quite understanding yet, but it was wonder. It was the feeling of a puzzle piece almost fitting. The whisperer nodded its great head and used its wing to gently point out to the ocean. It was showing the page that everything here was part of a big, beautiful circle. Can you think of something that ended for you, little friend? Maybe the end of a yummy cookie. That was the beginning of a happy tummy, or the end of a rainstorm. That was the beginning of a beautiful rainbow. Everything has a cycle. But the page's biggest challenge was yet to come. A wind picked up over the Inkwell Ocean, a wind that smelled of thunderstorms and erasers. The gentle waves grew taller and began to churn. The page boat, so small and light, was tossed about. The glowing fish dove deep for safety and the whisperer retreated to its cave. The page was all alone in the storm. This was the storm of doubt. The grumpy crab's words came back to it. You are an ending. You should sink. The waves seemed to shout it. This. The wind seemed to scream it. The page felt itself getting heavy with ink water, threatening to sink to the bottom. It was so scared. It was just one little page. How could it fight a whole storm? But then it remembered the warm breath of the whisperer. It remembered the feeling of the sugar grains, each one a tiny new beginning. It remembered the friendly nudge of the glowing fish. And it remembered its own sentence. And so they wondered what would happen next. It wasn't an ending. It was a question. And a question is the very beginning of all stories. This was the simple, logical twist. The page had thought it was an ending, but it had been a beginning all along. It just didn't know it yet. With this new brave thought, the page did something extraordinary. It stopped fighting the storm. It stopped trying to be an ending. Instead, it embraced its true nature. It let the wind and the waves toss it and turn it. It let the ink of the ocean splash upon its surface, not as a weight to drag it down, but as fresh, new words for a fresh new story. The storm began to calm. It had not been there to destroy the page, but to wash it clean, to give it a new purpose. As the waves grew still, the page boat was no longer a boat. It was just a page floating peacefully on the now calm ocean, but it was transformed. The lonely sentence was still there, but it was joined by other words. The letter B had been joined by others. The ink from the storm had settled upon it in perfect, beautiful letters. The sentence now read, because they wondered what would happen next, they decided to begin a brand new story. And right there, underneath, in big, bold, happy letters, were the two most wonderful words a page that was once an ending could ever hope to see. Chapter 1. The little page, which was now a first page, felt a joy so big it thought it might pop. It wasn't lonely anymore. It was full of potential. It was ready. The cycle was complete. The ending had become a beginning. The glowing fish returned, now with a whole school of other letterfish, and they danced around the new first page in a joyful, swirling circle. The wondrous whisperer came to the water's edge and bowed its great head in respect. Even the grumpy old crab from his coral tower watched and slowly, grumpily, nodded one eye, stalk in approval. The page had done it. It had learned the great secret of the Inkwell Ocean. It had discovered that nothing ever truly ends. The last cookie is gone, making room for a new snack. The setting sun says good night, so the rising sun can say good morning. The final page of a story is simply the first page of the next adventure waiting to be written. The new first page felt the warm sunbeam that had started it all begin to fade. The Inkwell Ocean started to gently recede, flowing back into the great book. The page, now brimming with a brand new beginning, was settled gently back into the book. But it was no longer at the end. It was right at the very front. The book's cover closed with a soft, contented sigh. The adventure within was no longer paused. It was ready to start again, from a brand new chapter 1. All because one little page learned that every ending is a gift wrapped up as a new beginning. What do you think the new story will be about? Will it be a tale of a brave little sugar grain on the sparkling beach? Or perhaps the adventure of the glowing letterfish in the deep ink sea? The most wonderful part is that the story can be anything we imagine, together. And what shall we learn about in our next adventure? Will we learn about the magic of sharing? Or perhaps the wonderful world of shapes that hide all around us? Join us next time to find out. Moral: embracing change with courage and optimism, knowing that endings are not something to be feared but are necessary and beautiful steps that lead to exciting new starts.